I have a friend who was keen to get fit, so he started to take up running. After running for a short while, he enjoyed it so much, he decided to train for the 42-kilometer marathon. He had about 8 months to prepare to run and compete in a major marathon. So he made it a point to just go out and run every night when he got home from work. But after a while, he realized he wouldn't know if he was going to be able to complete the marathon if he didn't know how he was progressing. So he started to work out his goal. His ultimate goal was to run the marathon in 8 months' time in under 4 hours. Working backwards from this goal, his short-term goal was to run 10 kilometers within 1.5 hours comfortably by the end of the first month of training. His midterm goal was to run 25 kilometers within 3 hours by the end of month 4. And his final goal was to run 32 kilometers, which is often known as the wall in marathon running, once, 2 months before the marathon in under 3.5 hours. I'm sharing this with you to illustrate how important it is to know what we specifically want to achieve, to give us a greater chance of achieving it. This is very much the case in our business situations. Our goals give us a clear direction. They're focused on outcomes and not on process. Here's a simple business example. Reduce average delivery time from 1 week to 3 days within 6 months. Just like my friend the marathon runner, if it will take some time to achieve your end goal, it's important to establish some interim goals along the way. Once you have these identified, you can then work out what you need to do to achieve it. Of course, the environment may change, the needs of the business can change along the way, and people move on. We need to be continually monitoring what is going on to determine if we need to adjust our goals along the way. Let's go back to our scenario. What do you think might be the overall project goal for Tom the project manager in the scenario we described earlier? Well, the goal of the project is to ensure everyone is utilizing the new electronic approaches by the end of the financial year. As it is October and the end of the financial year is the end of June, Tom may decide that a few interim goals are necessary, such as 1. Short-term, processes are in place electronically by mid-December. 2. Midterm, the new electronic procedures have been piloted with one department by the end of February. 3. Project goal, get the rest of the organization using the system by the end of May, allowing for a bit of a cushion. So take the time to be clear on the overall goal and work back from there. So let's continue. We now have an understanding of our key stakeholders and our project goals. It's time to think about the next meeting or discussion we need to have, which will take us one step closer to achieving the goal. Often when I ask people, "What's your objective for the meeting or discussion?" their response is more about what they will discuss rather than their objective. For example, they might answer along the following lines. My objective is to talk about the detail of the project and then outline how we can make it happen. That sounds okay, but let's see if we can make it more like an objective. An objective is not about process. It's all about outcome, just like our goals. What do you want to achieve as a result of the discussion or meeting? So it's important for us when planning to always think with this end in mind. If we think back to my friend the marathon runner, his objective for any particular run could be to reduce the time by 1 minute over yesterday's run. Think of an objective as being shorter term and defining measurable actions to achieve an overall goal. So let's look at how we set an objective. First, we need to determine exactly what we want the person we're influencing to do as a result of the discussion. Imagine you're planning to ask your boss for a raise. What do you want her to do? Well, give you a raise, of course. But the boss is not going to give you a raise just because you ask for it. She needs to think and feel certain things in order to agree. We need to take her on a journey. The other thing to consider when asking ourselves what our do is to make sure that it is something that is achievable. If the boss is going to agree to give you a raise, what would she need to think? Probably several things. As we discussed earlier in stakeholder analysis, people's wants and needs are typically rational and emotional. You may have discovered through your analysis of the situation that rationally your boss is motivated by results and having a strong, capable team. In this case, your boss may need to think that you bring value to the organization, that your KPIs have been achieved, and that you're a strong performer. Okay, so what do you think she needs to feel? You may also know that your boss prides herself on being fair and being respected by her team. So in this scenario, she may need to feel good about giving you a raise and feel good about herself for supporting you. Also, she needs to feel confident that she won't lose a valuable member of the team. So objective setting is three-pronged. In order to get to the do, your stakeholders need to think something and feel something, which gives you a much better chance of getting them to take the action you're seeking. So now that you have your objective, you need to figure out how you're going to achieve it, how you're going to make them think and feel this way. Once we know this, we can plan our approach to influence our stakeholders. Let's go back to our case study. What do you think the objective would be for Tom's upcoming meeting with Dawn and Jen? Let's work back from the do. Our do might be to convince Dawn and Jen to agree to give you access to some of their team members so that you can start discussion on how you can gain access to key information required for the project's success. In order to achieve the do, Dawn and Jen may need to think that the project is a worthy initiative for the business and can deliver increased efficiency for them and all departments in the organization. Finally, Dawn and Jen may need to feel a level of comfort and trust in you and your prior experience working on a project of this kind, as well as feel confident that the success of the project will help them to achieve personal success. Now, I'd like to ask you to focus on your own influence initiative and think about your project goal, any interim goals that need to be achieved along the way, and the objective for your next meeting or discussion. Now we can plan our approach to influence. This is the third step of our ladder, and rapport is at the core. We have little chance of influencing our stakeholders if we don't have rapport with them. So what is rapport, and how do we build it? Good rapport exists when people understand and like each other. Rapport makes communication easier and more effective. So how do we achieve good rapport? Fundamentally, by emphasizing the similarities between us and the other person and minimizing the differences. I'm sure you can see this happening in your own personal life and in the lives of the people around you. Friends talking to each other often unconsciously mirror each other's energy. They talk about common interests and share common values. They just look comfortable with each other. So when we're influencing others, we should look and listen carefully for any cues the other person gives us about their professional and personal interests. If you happen to share an interest, great. But even if you don't, express an interest in what they're talking about, simply by acknowledging and asking questions about it. You get the idea. Highlight the similarities, de-emphasize the differences. So how can we be sure we're building rapport with our stakeholders when trying to influence them? A couple of rapport-building things to think about. How to build rapport. First, ask questions. Sounds simple, but many of us find it much easier to talk about ourselves and what we need, rather than to ask questions of our stakeholders. Have you ever met someone in a social setting who did all the talking and never asked you anything about yourself? How did you feel? Probably as though they had no real interest in you, and possibly a bit deflated. Questioning shows you're not just interested in getting your idea across. You're keenly interested in getting to know what is of interest to them. Of course, questioning must be done well, because when it is, it builds rapport. Done badly, it may seem as though you're interrogating them. The other side of asking questions is to listen. There is no point asking great questions if we don't really listen to the reply. Not listening can be a rapport breaker, because the stakeholder may feel as though you aren't really interested. You're just going through the motions of asking questions. 2. Consider your approach. We discussed their communication style earlier. Be aware of their style and approach them in a way that will make them feel comfortable. 3. Be relevant. Link your ideas to their needs and wants. What are you trying to get them to agree to? You need to create a link for how their agreeing to this is relevant to them. We'll talk more about this later on in the program. Of course, there are many other things we can do to build rapport. Simple things like being on time for meetings and discussions, being respectful of their time, and many other things which I'm sure you do instinctively. Let's go back to our scenario. How might you go about building rapport with Jen and Dawn? For Jen, you may want to ask her about her team and even her family. Take time to get to know her, show a genuine interest in her and the work she has already undertaken developing the paper-based system under discussion. With Dawn, you may want to speak succinctly. Focus on the business issue at hand and help him see early on in the discussion the outcome the project will deliver and how this outcome can be beneficial to him. Remember, just because you have rapport doesn't mean you're guaranteed to keep it. We need to continually work on rapport. Check body language for any signs of hesitation or discomfort. Check in with the other person about how they're feeling about what you're suggesting. Now that we understand our stakeholders and know what we realistically want to achieve, we can think about how to start the conversation or meeting so that we get the other party's interest and attention right from the beginning. A simple structure to help us do this is as follows. Let's look at this in more detail. Let's start with the what. This is simply what is the overall topic or purpose of the meeting. In the because, ask yourself, this meeting is important to them because of what? It's important to note here that this meeting is not because it will help you, but because it will help them. The how is about how you will run the meeting. For example, simple things like logistics of the meeting, items for discussion, what is the best format for the meeting. For example, is it an informal discussion, a presentation, questions and answers, or a combination? Finally, the outcome. In the outcome, you want to consider and decide on what you realistically want to achieve by having this meeting or discussion. Now that we understand each element of this conversation starter, let's go back to our case study and think about how the setup could sound. Let's pretend you're Tom and are about to start the meeting with Dawn and Jen. Here's how it could sound using the structure. Hi, Jen and Dawn. Thanks for your time. I'm Tom, and I'll be responsible for taking the HR recruiting system from a paper-based format to an automated one. What I would like to discuss with you today is the execution of the project. This project is important because it will build efficiencies for the organization by taking the work conducted by you, Jen, and turning it into something that will deliver further cost savings and efficiencies to the organization through automation. I would like to first discuss A, what the audit told us about the manual system, B, some ideas I have for getting the project progressing, and C, how you can help. I've scheduled this meeting for 1 hour, and of course I welcome your thoughts at any time throughout our discussion. By the end of our discussion today, I'm hoping that you will understand why this project is considered urgent and agree to give me the green light to have discussions with some key members of your team to help move the project in the right direction. If that sounds okay to you, let's begin. So as you can see, with this simple structure, we help to focus our own thoughts on what we're trying to achieve and how we'll achieve it. And importantly, how the discussion has importance to our stakeholder. Exercise. Plan and practice your own setup. So now, why don't you go back to the planning tool and construct your own setup to a meeting you have pending? Once you've done this, why don't you practice saying it until it sounds completely natural to you?